So as you can see by the title of the slide today, we're going to be discussing the rise of the BISO. It's kind of new and it's been popping up recently in the cybersecurity industry, but it's actually a position that originated around the same time as the CISO. When both came up, the BISO focused primarily on the different departments that they were assigned to and didn't really have much cooperation with the rest of the organization. As cyber threats evolved, the organizations realized that they needed more of a organization-wide cybersecurity program, and that's when the CISO uh, took over and took over that BISO position and encompassed their functions. In recent years, the BISO has been making a comeback, serving a similar role that they did previously, but with more coordination with the company as company-wide with the CISO. So today we'll be discussing the definition of the term BISO, why organizations could use a BISO, and practical steps for hiring, incorporating, and tracking the success of the BISO should you decide that you need one. Also, a quick note on the presentation. Much of the content that we got for this presentation was derived from the BISO program and role white paper that FS-ISAC put out. We'll be providing that along with the slides after this presentation, as Nick mentioned. Yeah, right. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. So to start, what is the BISO? The BISO, there are a few different definitions that you can find online, but generally it'll boil down to this. The Business Information Security Officer, or BISO, is a role within an organization that serves as a two-way bridge between cybersecurity and a particular business unit. This two-way bridge allows for clarification of business requirements to cybersecurity and vice versa. It allows for the cybersecurity requirements to be more aligned with the business. With that, the responsibilities of the BISO are numerous, but generally, as FS-ISAC has defined, include business cybersecurity accountability, managing cyber risk, and consulting and advising with the different units in the cybersecurity program as a whole. Now, I know that, like as I mentioned, that's how FS-ISAC defines it, but I know JT Ash has a few comments on that. So let's hear what you have to say, JT.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I kind of think of it in two different types of pillars and all that stuff. You're talking about the differences between cybersecurity relationships between the CISO and the BISO. And then I like to move into a different one. It's about officers of an organization or a corporation. So I'm going to start off with, we are all familiar with the Chief Information Security Officer, but many are noticing the emergence of the Business Information Security title in cybersecurity leadership domains. While both positions aim to protect an organization's information assets, their responsibilities, focused areas, and interactions with the organization differ significantly. Some of the key differences between a CISO and a BISO. A CISO is primarily focused on the strategic and technical aspects of cybersecurity, while the BISO is focused on aligning security with business objectives. Different types of responsibilities. CISOs develop and implement security strategies, oversee technical security measures, and ensure compliance, while BISOs work with the business units to align security measures with business goals, manage risks, foster communications. Some of the interactions that CISOs have, CISOs typically interact with IT and security teams, regulatory bodies, and senior executives, while BISOs, on the other hand, act as liaisons between IT security teams, business leaders, facilitating, and their biggest issue and their biggest role in all that stuff is facilitating communication and collaboration. Now, when you're looking at a different role, and this is what I've had many conversations with people talking about a Chief Information Security Officer and a Business Information Security Officer. And the reason they have it is because in an organization, when you form a business as a corporation, the board of directors is responsible for setting the overall direction of the company. The hands-on day-to-day work is carried out by the officers of the corporation. And I know there are many CISOs out there in CISO land who are not currently having a seat at the table, but this is what we're sitting there and looking at when you're talking about officers of the corporation. You know, corporations are also liable for debts and lawsuits, so they're required by law to have a specific hierarchy and ensuring accountability. Some of the roles that we talk about is Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Information Officer, and of course, the Chief Information Security Officer. Now, with all of the new rules that are coming off, and especially the one about the SEC, CISOs are being held liable and personally responsible for the security in their organizations. Now, I know I've worked in several big organizations to where I had insurance provided for me. That was part of my compensation package by being a CISO to make sure that if there was something that went wrong, and I know CISOs will be the first ones to understand this, to where we sit there and manage risk. We sit there and provide advice. We might not own the risk that would actually contribute to a breach or whatever it may be. So those are my two thoughts when you're talking about the difference between a BISO and a CISO, and understanding the officers of the organization and making sure that we don't stick any of the BISOs out there on a limb and have them responsible for things or accountable for the things in a court of law.
Thanks, JT. And that's a good segue into why a BISO. So why we would have a BISO, much of the things that JT just highlighted are the reasons why you'd want a BISO. The BISO provides that conduit for cybersecurity to communicate with particular business units and vice versa, as we mentioned. But more specifically, they have in-depth knowledge of the different departments that they're working with, and this allows them to better communicate with cybersecurity and with that business unit. They speak the lingo, they're able to better understand what that unit's trying to accomplish, which then allows them to align cybersecurity to that business unit, and then also to reach back to cybersecurity and tell them, hey, this might not be something that's feasible because of X, Y, and Z. It just allows for them to better communicate expectations across the whole organization. And it's not it. What this does is that it helps build trust throughout the organization between cybersecurity and the business units. It allows them to show that we're not just trying to create these organization-wide cybersecurity objectives that don't necessarily take into account all of the different business units and what they're capable of doing. It shows them that we're listening and that we're going to try to use cybersecurity to make sure the organization's secure, but enable business along the way without trying to put too much hindrance on those units and stopping their functions from working as they are intended. And with that, I know that JT has some thoughts onto how digital transformation has really impacted this, and how the BISO can help support digital transformation or help with digital transformation throughout the organization.
You know, if I had a dime every time I had somebody ask me, well, why a BISO, I'd probably be retired by the time this actually views and all that stuff. So anytime anybody asks me why a BISO or why information security in a company, two words I always answer: digital transformation. Digital transformation has rapidly evolved from an innovative trend to an essential strategy for IT-oriented businesses. According to a recent report by McKinsey, companies that embrace digital transformation are 23% more likely to increase their market cap and are almost twice as likely to achieve significant revenue growth than those that don't. I mean, the revenue growth, and I've been through too many C-suite and board of directors meetings to where the two words that they care about are revenue growth. Now, for IT-oriented businesses, digital transformation isn't just about implementing new technologies. It's about rethinking processes, enhancing customer experiences, and creating efficiencies that drive measurable results. Gartner forecasts that by 2025, digital transformation investments will amount to over $2 trillion as organizations recognize its crucial role in building resilience, agility, and innovation. Companies that successfully leverage digital transformation often experience improved data-driven decision-making. And I know I'm going to say that again because I've heard so many people saying data-driven decision-making. streamlined operations, and enhanced customer engagement, ultimately leading to long-term growth and competitive advantage. I know we have a mantra that we always say that information security is a team sport and everybody's got a role to play. Well, digital transformation made that come to truth, made that come to fruition to where, hey, information is protecting our business processes. Protecting our information is a team sport, and everybody's got a role to play. We just have to figure out what your role is.
And just to highlight that, that's where we feel the BISO can fulfill that position. They can help better align all of those requirements throughout the organization. So with that, how would you incorporate a BISO? So incorporating a BISO, the specific alignment and reporting structure of BISOs within an organization can vary depending on the institution size, industry, culture. There's many different factors that can play into how you incorporate it. But close alignment to the team that the BISO supports is obviously going to be foundational to their success and really the effectiveness that they can have throughout the organization. With that in mind, alignment can be based off of your functional alignment. So you can have different lines of businesses or departments. You can have product alignment, such as cloud, mergers and acquisitions, computer network, etc. You can have geographic alignment, or you can have some type of combination of all the above. When it comes to reporting, FSISAC has stated that the BISO should report directly to the CISO and be a dotted line to the different business leaders that they support. Logically, I think this makes sense as the BISO is viewed as a mini CISO within the organization, but I know, again, JT's got a few thoughts on that as far as it comes to reporting.
Well, yeah, I have a few thoughts about that, but I want to actually just step back a minute and bring incorporating a BISO to life into people's living rooms and all that stuff, and understand in your corporation certain securities and lines of businesses and processes. We're going to talk about stuff like ERP, CRM, HCM, EHRs, and financial platforms, along with AI and LLMs. So ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. I'll give you some examples. Oracle NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics 365, SAP S4 HANA Cloud. I mean, Enterprise Resource Planning is a software system that helps organizations manage their core business processing. I mean, if that doesn't bring it to, how many people use that? Another thing we can talk about is customer relationship managers and all that stuff. Anybody ever heard of Salesforce? Once again, Microsoft Dynamics 365, Soho CRM. Customer relationship management is a solution that helps businesses manage interactions with current and potential customers. CRMs improve customer service and sales quality by compiling and analyzing customer data from multiple channels. Moving on to human capital management, I'll give three big ones: Workday, ADP, Oracle. Human capital management is a set of practices and systems that organizations use to manage their employees. HCM aims to increase the value of an organization's employees, which can lead to an improved productivity, engagement, and value. Now, moving into different industries and all of that stuff, I'm going into key examples of lines of business in the financial industry. Fiserv, FIS, Jack Henry. Hello? Oh, I thought I heard somebody. Fiserv, FIS, Jack Henry, those are all banking platforms. And when you're talking about banking platforms and business processes, you're looking at retail banking, commercial banking, investment banking, wealth management, brokerage services, mortgage lending, insurance, private equity, asset management. All of those things have business processes and customer information that is involved going back and forth. Moving on to the healthcare industry. If anybody's ever been in the healthcare industry, I know they understand the word Epic, Oracle. It used to be Cerner and all that stuff, Tiger. And you're looking at business processes such as cardiology, oncology, orthopedics, neurology, obstetrics, pediatrics. So this brings digital transformation to life. And I know people work in different industries, people work at different organizations, but we all have business processes and information that we need to protect. And that's how we need to incorporate, and it might not necessarily be a BISO, but information security enabling the business.
So
I did
JT, you
see
brought,
I did
oh,
see one question come in. I'm gonna kind of pause you here. This came in to me via the chat. Have you ever heard of a CISO transitioning to a career as a BISO or vice versa?
I'll take that first, JT. I have not. And again, this is more from, I think that the term BISO and the position is re-emerging within the industry. So personally, I have not seen that transition happen before. But JT, I don't know if you've seen
I
that.
actually have, and it's actually something that's actually happening a lot more pertinent because CISOs, I've been around this world about 35 years now and all that stuff. And if I can sit there instead of having to deal with the politics of a C-suite and having to play the politics of whose rice bowl I'm trying to play with or whatever it may be, or trying to influence them on why implementing security is, I can work in one business line. It's a lot less stressful. I've seen a lot of my friends who had lived in the seat of that saying, forget that. I'm just going to work in one business line. I work for Epic. I don't care about that. I care about the patient's health journey and all that stuff. So that's definitely one of those things that I've actually seen to where it takes a step back and it gives you an opportunity because you've been around for a while to actually take that enterprise perspective that you've mastered and bring it to that business line.
Thanks for the question, Nick, for posing it to us. And I want to go back to the reporting lines and the structural alignment, JT. So you brought up a bunch of different departments within banking, within healthcare. I think for banking itself, there was somewhere between 8 to 10 different business lines of unit that you mentioned. Would you say that there should be a separate BISO for each one of those? Or would there be one BISO or maybe three BISOs that would be assigned to multiple different departments?
That's a great question. And what I can tell you about this is, I believe, this is my belief, world according to JT and all of that stuff. I don't believe that the BISOs should actually work directly for me. I believe they should work for the lines of business. I might influence them and I will definitely collaborate with them and I will work with them. But their main objective and their main goal in life is to grow the business, is to secure the business while growing the business and all of that stuff. So I want them laser focused on how do we grow the business? How do we make it better, stronger, and faster? Now, they'll have a security flavor to them while they're understanding what encryption is, what authentication is. They'll understand the security things. And this kind of brings me back to a CISO role and all of that. So I believe, world according to JT again, is a CISO is a business executive first. My first goal as a CISO is to grow the business. I have a slant towards security, kind of like the CIO is a business executive first, but they have a slant towards information and technology. Just like a chief marketing officer, he's a business executive, but he has a marketing flair to him and all that stuff. So when you're talking about the difference between a BISO and a CISO is a business executive first. A
Mhm.
BISO still gets to play around and use the toys and tweak all of the stuff like that.
So I think that's a good segue into the question for reporting then. How would, as I mentioned, FSI SAC said that the BISO should report directly to the CISO or CIO, depending on the organization, and that there should be a dotted line to the different business unit leaders, risk organization, et cetera. How do you see that playing then? Would you say it should be a solid line to the business unit leader and then dotted line to the CISO? Or how, I guess what do you see that incorporation as?
The way I've seen it work actually best is the exact opposite of what they're trying to recommend. Because once again, if a BISO is when you get a BISO in a business line, if their number one priority is not the business line and how to grow the business, then their loyalties and what they're trying to accomplish might be coming into question. And I don't want that loyalty to come into question. That's my job as I'm dealing with the other lines of business and I'm dealing with the other politics as being a CISO. I want them maniacally focused to cardiology. I want them
Mhm.
maniacally focused just how can we do wealth management a little better and anything like that. So I actually believe, and I think we'll get to it later on the future of the BISO on where we believe that they need to be. But I think they need to be thoroughly embedded and part of a team of a business line.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the definition of BISO that we brought up on maybe the first or second slide, which is that they're that local expert of the business unit. And because of that, they should be driving the business, but they're there to help us better communicate those cybersecurity requirements so that,
Yeah.
again, so that we're enabling business in the most secure way possible. Um, we did get a question from the chat. So, JT, I think this is actually kind of a good segue into what you were just saying. So the question is, what is the difference between BISO and a title like GRC director? And I think that goes into something we touched on a little bit on the what is a BISO slide. But
Mhm.
that can change depending. So the term, I think that they're very similar, is the short answer. And I
Mhm.
think that the title depends on the industry that you work in. That term officer can come with certain requirements with it. So some organizations might choose to use the term GRC director, or I think we have risk management lead. Risk management specialist. There's other terms that you can use to fulfill that function. It all depends on the organization that you're working in, though, and what type of regulations you fall under. Uh,
And when I've actually ran organizations as the CISO, I kind of split my organization of the office of the CISO into two separate realms. You had a GRC side of the house, which was governance, risk, and compliance, and they kind of fed into the loop. And then I had a operations side of the house that dealt with auditing, dealt with reviewing, dealt with security ops, vulnerability management, incident response. So I kind of separated them. So a GRC director is directly in the information security or the office of the information security, and their job is to keep an eye on the overall organization, the risk to the organization, not necessarily the risk to the individual business line. So they need to keep they need to see the forest through the trees kind of thing. So I keep that in my office.
Thanks, JT. No, that's a great distinction. Um, Again, highlighting the fact that the BISO is supposed to be that business unit specialist first, and then report to the cybersecurity or help enable cybersecurity second. Colleen, I do see your question. We have a slide on that. I think it's coming up in 3 slides. So
Yep.
be patient, and we'll get to that.
And
All
thank you
right.
everyone so far for the questions. Feel free to
Keep them
interject at
coming. I
any
love
point.
it.
Yes, keep them
Yeah,
coming.
this
We
is
we really
awesome. This
enjoy
is
it.
great.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on. Does your organization need a BISO? So the criteria for deciding whether your organization needs a BISO is going to be specific to each business, but it boils down to, can you make the business justification for hiring a full-time senior security employee to embed in a business line? There's many different ways that you can use to determine that justification, but a few check boxes that you can try to go through are: where is your business in terms of maturity and goals? Are there technical groups keeping up with aligning their initiatives with both business and customer needs? Is the organization experiencing a lot of changes in meeting goals due to a lack of security and business integration? Are there gaps in translating security objectives and policies into specific business practices and procedures? And does the business understand the threat landscape, have security incidents based on social engineering increased, et cetera, et cetera? Um, do security leaders have enough bandwidth to keep up with increasing industry regulations and requirements? That's one that actually JT and myself, when we were game planning for this, we talked about that one quite a bit. I think that that's something that's not addressed, at least from our perspective, as often as it should be, is bandwidth requirements from cybersecurity. We're always gung ho, at least at Compass, anyways. We're gung ho and believe that we can tackle most anything. I think keeping those bandwidth requirements for your staff is important, though, as we want to make sure that we're enabling security, enabling the business. And then lastly, as supply chain risks increase, how often is the business engaging third party and fourth party vendors? Are these risk assessments consistent? Is the organization doing more business with the government, et cetera? There's many different questions you can ask to determine whether you are meeting all of your security objectives and whether you could use a BISO to better enable those objectives.
Now I know Jeff has looked at it internally, and when we sit there and we make hiring decisions and everything like that, I look at things internally to see if I can do that, but I also have to take a look externally to see if I can make it happen. Can I make the business justification of hiring a senior security employee to embed into a business line? Have I done the cost benefit analysis? I mean, when you're talking about a BISO, you're talking about somebody who's going to command between probably $125,000, $150,000. Am I going to get that return of investment by embedding that person into a business line and making sure that we're able to get a return on that? Have I looked at the value proposition? And when I talk about value proposition, I kind of look at it in three different ways that are buzzwords nowadays. If you sit there and you're integrating artificial intelligence to your business and all that stuff, even though you ask ChatGPT and Copilot a question, how do you know if the answer they provide is accurate? And the reason I say this is there's a story out there, and I'm pretty sure it's true and all that stuff. A lawyer who was trying this particular case asked GPT a question, and GPT came back with an answer citing this particular case and said, da 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 da. Well, the lawyer thought that sounds good. If GPT told me I'm supposed to do this, he actually cited this case in court to a judge and found out that that case didn't even exist. And so when we're talking about integrating artificial intelligence, yes, we might ask ChatGPT or Copilot a question, but we also have to sit there and verify the answer they give us is actually factual. If you're looking at certain stuff like maintaining large language models, creating and maintaining data flow diagrams, and last but not least, I'd be curious to understand how many organizations track and manage their APIs that they have.
Thanks, JT. I think a lot of it, again, another checkbox that you can use or another consideration would be future projecting as well. A lot of the question or a lot of the items that we just presented there are how are you doing presently, but you could, if you have metrics that you're tracking and trying to forecast how the business is going to operate in the future, you could use that to also determine whether you need a BISO or not.
Mm-hmm.
JT, I got a good question for you too. I think you'll like this one. If you have a CISO and a BISO, what is the purpose of having a CISO?
I'd love to take you, and I think, Hilda, I love you for that question and all that stuff, because when we're talking about a CISO and a BISO, right now, nowadays, and even a CSO, if you're looking at the difference between a large organization and a small organization. Now, if you're talking about IBM, you're going to have a CISO who's in charge of the information security. Then you're going to bring a CSO who's in charge of executive transport. We know what happened with the healthcare CEO. He's going to be worried about physical security. He's going to be worried about cameras. He's going to be worried about all that kind of stuff. And the BISO will sit there and be worried about, and I'm going to go back to wealth management in a bank. But when you're talking about having all of these roles in information security, you have to look at the difference between having a large organization that can afford it and a small organization that can't. But when you're that small organization, Hilda, guess what? You not only have to be that CSO, you have to be the CISO and the BISO all wrapped into one, to where if you got 1 to 50 people in your organization, guess what? You got physical security, you got cameras, you got information security, and then guess what? If you don't know your business lines, you better get up on them really quickly. So, when you're talking about big corporations and small corporations, you still need all of those roles, but big organizations can have a person in them. Small organizations, you have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah, and we'll touch on this a little bit on the last slide where we go into the future of the position. But as JT mentioned, I think it's all dependent on the size of the organization. Um, if you're a much larger organization, you're going to need all of those roles. Whereas if you're a smaller organization, you still need to do all of the functions that those roles do, but you might have to do it with fewer employees, unfortunately. But again, as we mentioned on the last slide, I think we'll talk about we can incorporate all of those functions that those roles provide us with throughout the organization.
So true, Carolyn. You're not
Yes,
only the BISO,
unfor-
but you're also probably the chief security officer also.
I think you're all of those roles that were just mentioned. All right, and who asked for the success or for the metrics? Colleen, next slide, we've got you. So going forward, actually, sorry, not the next slide, two slides from now. But going forward, we're going to assume that the organization has made the decision to hire a BISO. And so then we're going to give some practical steps on what to look for when hiring a BISO and then also how to track success. So for what to look for, the attributes needed for the BISO can vary depending on the seniority of the role, the organization, etc. But from a high level, the BISO should have technical expertise, communication skills, executive presence, and then relationship management abilities. This is obvious as much of their role is going to be communicating between the different business units and then cybersecurity and vice versa. That's how FSISAC describes it, but obviously there's going to be more required for when you're hiring a BISO, such as certifications. They're going to need to make sure that they're staying abreast of all of the current cybersecurity trends and threats within the impact the business that they're going to be working with. They need to show business acumen. They need to be able to have a good understanding of the business that they will be embedding with. And truthfully, if I were to pick one of those four bullets that are labeled there, the ability to manage relationships might be their most important thing, as that's really where the BISO is going to make their bread and butter. They're going to be they're going to have to quickly learn the lingo of the business unit that they work with and what's important to that business unit. And then they also have to be able to speak cybersecurity as well, because they're going to have to, in one hand, be able to go back to that business unit and explain to them the requirements that cybersecurity is giving to them, and then vice versa, go back to cybersecurity and explain to them why what we're telling them to do might not make sense for that business unit. But JT, I don't know if you have any more that you want to put onto that or add on to that.
Just a little bit on this particular one. I've been a hiring manager probably about 15 years, and the first thing I need to do is I need to understand my strengths and my weaknesses. And my strengths, I believe I communicate well. I believe I build relationships well, but I might not be as technically savvy as the next person and all that stuff. So my advice and my recommendation is always hire and to complement your weaknesses. If you guys were on the webinar where we were setting up and all that stuff, we were sitting there and giving Nick a bunch of grief because he hired Caitlin because Caitlin's really good, organizationally well, and all that stuff, and complements some of the things that he would rather not do and all that stuff. So please understand yourself first. And then if the BISO is in your CISO world and all that stuff, and you're going to be managing them, I always hire people. I don't need yes men here. I need people who are going to make my organization better. So I'm going to sit there and, I always like certifications because that means they're willing to learn, whether it's CISSP, CRISC, CISA, CCSP, or whatever like that. And plus, I have to understand that I'm going to be offering this guy between probably $120,000 and $180,000 annually to keep him happy, to keep him healthy, to keep him engaged and all that stuff. So those are the things that I'm going to look at.
One thing
Uh,
that came in, and it's not necessarily a question, more of a comment, depends on how much money would have to be paid in fines and penalties when deciding between CISO, BISO, CSO. Oh, and don't forget about all the new privacy regulations.
yeah,
Great point. Great point.
yeah.
Yeah, we could sit there and spend a whole nother webinar on privacy and all of that stuff. So great comment. Thank you.
JT, I know this is probably going to depend on the industry that they're embedding with, but what type of experience are we looking for too when we're hiring a BISO? How many years are you thinking?
Great question and all that stuff. And I really don't look at years of experience.
Hmm.
The biggest thing that when I've hired people and all that stuff, are they curious? And
Yeah.
that's the number one trait I've always looked for when I've hired for information security. Are you curious? Are you curious when you hit enter on the keyboard? What happens? And how does the information flow from point A to point B? If you're not curious about learning, and that's why I say with all of these certifications, so I would say I can't teach curiosity, but I can train somebody how to do information security.
No, that's a great comment, JT. And I think a lot of us here have sat in the CISO seat and where we've had to hire people. And I can speak for experience for myself. I've hired people with all the experience, with all of the certifications, with their resumes looked great. But when they came to work, there was something lacking, and it was I think curiosity is a great way to describe it, but it's just that willingness, that hunger, that desire to work. And I think that can go for really any position that you're hiring for, is that you obviously you need this experience. They need to show some type of technical acumen. They need to show whatever s- technical skills are required for the role they're fulfilling. They need some of that. But I've found that I've had much more success when I've hired somebody that maybe didn't have all of the skills needed, but they've showed hunger and desire and a willingness to learn and showed I'll use hunger again in attacking certifications and attacking that knowledge gaps that they had. I've had much more success with those individuals than I've had with maybe somebody that had a great resume but lacked that hunger.
We did get a comment in the chat that there is always a tendency for management to avoid cost. Got
Yeah.
it 100%. And I can tell you a quick story about this because I know we're running late on time. I I went and did an assessment at a federal government corporation and all that stuff, and I provided them with an assessment, and he sat back in his chair. He goes, Jay, this is probably one of the most thorough assessments that I've had, that I've read and all that stuff. And if I sit there and I look at it and I implement all of those recommendations, it's probably going to cost me $150,000. He goes, but you have to look at it from my perspective. And sometimes we lose this in information security, but we don't have the overall perspective of, I can take that $150,000 and make veterans' lives that much better. Now you have to look at it from my perspective to where, am I going to take that $150,000 and spend it on security, or am I going to spend $150,000 and possibly make veterans' lives easier? That's why I don't know if it's avoiding costs, but justifying the cost. Can we justify, if we embed a BISO into a business line, that we can reduce the risk to a tolerable level of spending that money? So, you have to, when you get into the C-suite, when you get into budgeting and all that stuff, everybody wants to protect their own rice bowl because they've got goals and they've got objectives to do. You have to sit there and understand there's a give and take in that particular world. So I got that. I understand. Ha ha. Hilda, that's another conversation with CNOC where I'd love to sit there and have a conversation with you.
Just to highlight what you were saying too about avoiding cost, JT, I think that going back to justifying whether you need a BISO or not, that falls on us as the CISO to make that business justification. So we should be doing the legwork to determine whether it's going to be cost effective to hire that full-time employee as a BISO or not. And we should be able to provide that business case to the C-suite to make it rather than give them the fuzzy numbers that might not convince them that we need that position.
Yep.
What was Sorry, I'm just reading this statement from David. Oh, that's great, David. Thanks for putting the comment in there. All right, so moving, I think Colleen was the one who asked about metrics. Now, Colleen, that's going to be our next slide. Now, I will say you may be a little little disappointed because unfortunately there are currently no industry-wide performance metrics that are defined specifically for the BISO. And because just based off the role of the BISO, they start few projects and initiatives. They're more there to help support projects and initiatives that were maybe either derived from a business unit or from cybersecurity, makes it even more difficult to determine whether your BISO is having success. However, the BISO is critical in enabling the success of the business by helping to manage the operational and secure cybersecurity risks. So with that, we can use the following to measure some of the BISO's performances. And of course, there's going to be more things you can look at, but you can look at, are there any past due security issues? Especially if you are tracking those prior to hiring the BISO and then after, you might be able to see a difference in there. Remediation status of penetration test findings by each line of business. If you have a line of business where maybe you've hired a BISO, but another one where you haven't, and you recently had a pen test done, you can compare and contrast. Of course, it's not going to be an apples to apples, depending on the findings, but that's one way you can do it. Um, the other is going to be just more of an ephemeral metric, but degree of involvement in supporting the line of business. Again, a lot of these are not hard numbers that you can point to that say the BISO is doing X for my business. It's more of a feeling, which again, I know none of us here like to just go based off of a feeling, but um, unfortunately, at the moment, there are no just hard industry metrics that are used to track the success of a BISO. I'm sure JT has
And there
some
might not
comments
be
on
any
this.
hard metrics and all that stuff, but this is the same thing when you're building a software package and all that
Yes.
stuff. When you're hiring that BISO, you're hiring them for requirements. You're saying, I want them to do A, B, C, D, E, and F. Now, you just take that A, B, C, D, E, and F, and you turn it around. Okay, how are they able to affect A? How are they able to accomplish B and all that stuff? Same thing when you're sitting there and building a software package to where you're sitting there and saying, okay, these are my functional requirements of the software. This is what it has to do. This is what I would like to do it. And then when you're sitting there and testing that software before it goes to production, how well did we do on achieving those functional requirements and those non-functional requirements? So it kind of works hand in hand to where when you've hired for a VSO, you've hired it for a reason
Mhm.
and for requirements. You take those requirements and you flip them on its end and you say, how well is he doing on those requirements? And that's where you have your metrics. But I
Yeah.
agree with Jeff, there's no standard national-wide metrics that you want to use.
Yeah, but again, as JT mentioned, you know, if you've gotten to the point where you're hiring a BISO, you know why, and you might not be able to point to a specific number that says the BISO is having success, but it'll be one of those things you know it when you see it. All right, and moving on to the future of the BISO role. So, what will the future of the BISO role entail? If we're being honest, nobody knows what the future will entail. But what we can be sure of is that cybersecurity requirements for organizations as they mature and evolve, having a BISO or some type of embedded security role is going to be a necessity to help the business. I think this is going to continue to grow throughout the years. Organizations right now rely on the CISO to provide those cybersecurity requirements, and then they get filtered down to the organization. As the security becomes more and more important, especially with, as JT mentioned, digital transformation, having embedded security is going to be more important than ever. And that can be fulfilled by a BISO. But if you're a smaller organization, you can look for what JT and I will sometimes call security champions. Those are people that maybe their role isn't specifically what a BISO would be, but they're passionate about cybersecurity and they're also very good at their own jobs. You can look at incentivizing those individuals to better help enable security in their particular department. The incentives can be, maybe extra vacation, financial. There's different ways that you can attack that problem. But regardless, cybersecurity is going to have to be embedded throughout the organization. And I know that currently all of us as CISOs say that. We probably repeat that mantra. throughout the year thousands of times. But I truly believe that as industry grows, it's going to have to become more of a reality than just make sure you do your cybersecurity awareness training once a year and be aware of the potential threats that could impact you. There's going to have to be more of a hands-on um, approach that a lot of our different business units are going to have to take to cybersecurity. What are your thoughts?
And with different corporations and different organizations, you see it nowadays. If you're sitting there and working in the healthcare system, you see it in Epic. When you're
Mhm.
working in the financial system, you're seeing it with Fiserv, and even when you're not working with it, Salesforce, ADP, you're seeing business analysts embedded in that business line to make sure that we're doing things in accordance with the business. We're seeing budget analysts making sure we're meeting all of the budget requirements for that particular business line. Same thing, you're embedding IT analysts into that business line to make sure your technological advances are getting taken care of. This is no different that I see the future of embedding a security analyst or some sort of security professional into the business line to make sure they're working alongside the business analyst, the budget analyst, the IT analyst to make sure that, I'm going to use those two words again, digital transformation. Digital transformation is a game changer. It has changed. I've been around this a long time, and I don't think I've seen anything. I was here when it was IT 21 back in the late 90s and all of that stuff. I don't think anything has changed the information security and technology rule except for digital transformation. And last but not least, and all that stuff, security enables the business. That's our job. If the business is not enabled, we don't have a job.
And with that, that is the end of our presentation. So we'll take on questions, but I think as a parting note, we just want to emphasize that throughout the presentation, the BISO might seem like it's a position that your company might not need, but I think that if we could highlight that, maybe the position itself, the BISO, you might not need as an organization, but everybody is going to need security embedded in their different business units, and there's many different ways that we can attack that. It's up to us as CISOs to identify how we can meet those requirements and implement them within our organization. Thanks, guys.
Great
And I'm going to
presentation,
go with my
gentlemen.
mantra. Information security is a team sport, and everybody's got a role to play. You just got to figure out what your role is.
That was wonderful. Thank you both so much. I'm going to remind everybody there's one more chance right now to ask questions. I did have one kind of question slash comment come through, and I know you guys touched upon it a bit. Something to review carefully. If an organization is hiring a BISO, what type of authority versus responsibility is there? And I know you guys kind of covered this a bit. I don't know if you have any closing comments on that. Authority
I,
versus responsibility.
I like that. And I'm going to go with the racy matrix and all that stuff. Are they responsible? Are they accountable? Are they confirmed? Or are they informed and all that stuff? What we do, I'll give you, for instance, when you're sitting there and you're contracting for cloud services and all that stuff, you might outsource the responsibility of doing some of the IT and security work for you. But guess what? You can't outsource the accountability. So you need to make sure you put things in place such as oversight and governance for those cloud services because you're paying them a boatload of money on a monthly basis. You need to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I'm going to go from the racy matrix. Hey, you can outsource the responsibility for doing something, but you can't outsource the accountability.